Thank you so much for having me here today. It's such an honor to be with you and to be able to share my story and share some of the stories of women in Ethiopia that have been suffering from an issue called obstetric fistula. And I want to thank the Women of Vision Albuquerque chapter for having me here. So thank you to Diane Decker, Diane Holzer, Molly, Kathleen, and Sherry, and everyone that's made this possible. I actually just arrived from Ethiopia on Wednesday, so it's been quite a journey, and very nice to be here in New Mexico. It's just a privilege to be able to share more about the work that we're doing there. I was actually just in Ethiopia with Natalie Rublia, who's a singer, who's working on a film about fistula, and Caleb's going to help me a little bit with some of the slides this morning, so I can share some of the stories that we were filming in Ethiopia. This is, we're following some of the work of our Safe Mothers Ambassadors. And Hiwat on the left, Hiwat Gade, is a 32-year-old Safe Motherhood Ambassador. And she graduated last summer, and she has done phenomenal work, including identifying the woman on the right, Hiwat Nerea. Hiwat Nerea suffered from fistula for 40 years. So she remained hidden in her community for 40 years, having no communication with her community, and it wasn't until Hiwat graduated from our program and went back that she was able to identify Hiwat, and just in June she was able to have surgery. And this is the importance of the work that we're doing, is that we know that there are women that are suffering throughout Ethiopia that have had no access to emergency medical care, have remained hidden in their communities. And so we're training an army of Safe Motherhood Ambassadors to be able to go out and identify women that have fistula and also to prevent fistula in their communities. Caleb? The next slide is a woman, a Safe Motherhood Ambassador called Sendayo Darga, and she's 27 years old. She was married at 16 and suffered from fistula on her first pregnancy, was immediately divorced, and was able to be cured within 3 months, but then went home and didn't really have any resources, any family. And so she came and was trained as a Safe Motherhood Ambassador 2 summers ago. She was actually in that video that we showed. And since then, she's educated over 50 pregnant women in her community. She's bought several sheep, so she has an income. And just in July, she actually spoke at a national eradication campaign that was launched in Ethiopia. Caleb, the photo here is her speaking in front of an audience at Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, at the government's launch of the fistula elimination campaign. And so Ethiopia has now taken the issue of fistula to heart. They've actually recognized that this is something that can be prevented, can be eliminated, as it has been here in the United States over 100 years ago. And so now we're working closely with the government and with our Safe Motherhood Ambassadors to be able to reach the goal of eradicating fistula by 2020. And it's a huge goal, and that's why we need everyone's help, and that's why we're very grateful for World Vision and the work of Women of Vision that have been helping to support this work. But it's really women like Sendayo that are empowered and then on the front lines in their communities and in speaking in front of their governments to really ask for change. So just thankful for your help in making that possible. Sorry, Caleb, the slide right before, I did want to also show you something that was very special that happened just last week. Sendayo on the right there is speaking to a group of religious leaders in her community. So Muslim leaders and Christian leaders, they came together, which was really gives a joy. We like to bring a lot of people together a lot of times, and this was a remarkable happening. And they actually met together, and Sendayo and our spiritual counselor, Tespai, spoke to this community about what fistula is. And previously, none of the religious leaders had any awareness about fistula. And so once they had learned about it, these are the people in the communities that have the most influence. And so they're able to really help other women that might have fistula and help explain what it is and help reduce the stigma of fistula. So we're working to do many more engagements like that. I wanted to ask Actually, in this room, who knows what fistula is? I know we've been talking a lot about it, but you can raise your hand if you know what fistula is. So a great number of you, which is remarkable, because 10 years ago, when I first went to Ethiopia, I had no idea what fistula was. I was working as a filmmaker in New York, and I learned about the issue through a New York Times article, but had no idea that it even existed. We just don't talk about it. We don't hear about it here anymore. And so for those of you that don't know, fistula is a childbirth injury. It occurs during prolonged obstructed labor. So malpositioning of a baby or obstructed labor where the baby is trying to get out in the normal 24 hours, and the pressure, though, if it's not able to come out, creates the tissue along the birth canal, so the vagina and the bladder, in some cases the rectum, actually is pressed so many times by the baby that it dies and it falls out, and that causes the fistula, which is essentially a tear, and that causes chronic incontinence. So a woman that after that prolonged excruciating labor, which can last several days, she loses her baby in most cases, and then she wakes up to not being able to control her urine and in some cases feces. And as you can imagine, it's just a horrific experience. Not only she carried this baby and has dealt with a very, very painful, exhausting labor, but then to not be able to control, your urine and not know why, and not know why it was caused and what could have been done for it to be prevented. And so tragically, estimated 9,000 new cases of fistula develop every year in Ethiopia because of the lack of education and awareness and emergency obstetric care services. Worldwide, it's estimated that 2 to 3 million women suffer from fistula. And beyond Ethiopia, it occurs in over 49 countries. And it's not only the physical consequences that are severe, but the psychological consequences are quite difficult. Caleb? So your typical obstetric fistula patient, this is a woman, one of our Safe Husband ambassadors actually in the Tigray region where we work. They're oftentimes divorced because of the fistula, because husband considers them cursed and not able to have children, and so immediately, if they're still leaking urine, they don't want to be around them. So they immediately divorce them. And a lot of times these women are very small in stature, under 5 feet and under 100 pounds, often because of some of the root causes of fistula, which include malnutrition, early marriage. So many of these young, small women are having difficulties with their labor, which causes the fistula. And often, as you can see, most, the majority will be married early, when the average age of 15. And so the consequences of the physical, not only are they having difficulty with the fistula, but psychologically, they're often abandoned and really isolated by their communities. So because of the smell, they don't want to be around others, and they really can't be around others. They can't participate in communal activities that are so common in places like Ethiopia. There's not TV and internet, so the main activities are coffee ceremonies and going to church and washing by the water. And so for so many of these women, they're just cut off from that, and they have no ability to interact with the people that they love, even their own families. They feel ashamed to be around them. And in a lot of cases, because there isn't information and education and religious, leader training, they are considered cursed. And so then, there's a religious stigma against them. Their very own God that they love, they feel rejected by that God. And so it's a horrible injury, and I think that is why when I first went to Ethiopia to work on the film A Walk to Beautiful and just came face to face with some of these women that have suffered from fistula for many years, I just couldn't turn back and couldn't go back to just normal life and know that not only are these women suffering like this, but that more and more women will continue to suffer from this if some of the preventive measures weren't put in place. And I also, I guess, didn't realize at the time, but that also I deeply resonated with some of their guilt and pain and shame through some of my own personal experiences. And so when I started Healing Hands of Joy, really hoping and with a desire and a passion to help these women heal, not only physically, but spiritually and mentally and psychologically, and just as women, I didn't realize that also God was helping me in terms of my own healing in some of the circumstances of my past. And if you allow me, I wanted to share a little bit about that and my own personal story and how I actually came to even work on A Walk to Beautiful and how Healing Hands of Joy came about. I wanted to share with you a quote that really has helped me to kind of understand more about this journey of starting Healing Hands of Joy. It's from an author, Beth Moore. Some of you probably know her. From a great book that she wrote, So Long in Security. I recommend it. And so did a friend of mine. I was like, okay, thanks. It's a great book. And the quote is, if you're willing, you could probably trace your passion all the way to the deepest point of your pain. And I grew up in New Hampshire, and I grew up in a Christian home, and had a wonderful family, and didn't really, my mother was a nurse, and so she was often working on the weekends, and so I didn't have a lot of experience in church. But my grandmother was a very, very strong Christian, Gideon member, sent me, the small little New Testaments all the time, and lots of cards reminding me how much Jesus loved me. But I never really had, my own relationship with God. And I remember when I was a teenager, my grandmother had taken me to a church in New York City, even though I was up in New Hampshire, called Times Square Church. Some of you might know or have heard of David Wilkerson, who wrote Crossing the Switchblade and started Teen Challenge. So it was a really, really wonderful church, and just remember being with her in that church and her grabbing my hand and us going to the altar and me giving my life to God. And of course I was a teenager at the time, and then a few years later ended up coming to New York for college. And I went to NYU, I was in drama and film, and I think the escape out of New Hampshire kind of caused in me a dramatic, change in terms of, wanting to do everything, try everything, and I did. And so I got involved in a lot of not so great things, a lot of drinking and drugs, and a lot of, things that I guess could be, sadly, kind of a normal thing for some college students. But I was literally kind of just walking very, very far away from God. And I ended up becoming pregnant. And quickly, because of where I was and sort of my dreams for stardom and being an actress and fame, and I just quickly realized or quickly wanted to have nothing to do with a baby. And so I had an abortion. And I think at the time I was, so young and so caught up in this, sort of crazy lifestyle that I really just buried that very deep inside me and just, that's done, and moved away, walked away from that, and really in some ways forgot about it, and to the best of my ability. And then when I graduated college, I really sort of felt the bubble of being in school in New York kind of burst. And there I was in New York with, no job, no career, very, few friends at the time, far away from my family, and just feeling very depressed and kind of lost, having no purpose. And I had a job and ended up living with a coke addict. And this apartment in Hell's Kitchen, of all places, was a block away from the church that my grandmother had taken me to. And I was just really, I mean, every time I think back about that and how God was so good, you know, to just take care of me and take care of the circumstances, you know. And so I ended up really just going back to listen to the music, and this church in New York has this beautiful gospel choir. And so I just go for that, just to, you know, be consoled in that way. And then soon, of course, the message really gripped me. And I decided after some time to recommit my life to the Lord, and just really developed a much deeper relationship with God, to the point where I was in entertainment. So I had been starting to work in film, but I really felt like, you know, I wanted to make a radical change and work in ministry or be a missionary, or, you know, just kind of was like going way ahead of God. And God was saying, just hang on. And I ended up getting this job at Eagle Entertainment, so the documentary production company. And within the year, about 2004, so about 10 years ago, this issue and the column that we read in the New York Times about obstetric fistula was brought into our office. And I kind of just knew, I was like, God, this is unbelievable. And I really felt like this is why I'm here and why I'm still working in entertainment. And was just really grateful and became very passionate about making sure that this film got made. And so I did, once we raised a little bit of money for the film, I begged my boss for me to be able to go to Ethiopia and work on the production. And when I was there, it just hit me. I just felt so at home and so at peace in this place that was so foreign. It was my first time to Sub-Saharan Africa, but the place and the people, just so remarkable and so beautiful, and just really felt like, you know, that was where God wanted me to be. And it took several years to finish our film and be able to, as Steph mentioned, you know, really get it out there. We wanted to make sure as many people as possible knew about what fistula was and how they could help to prevent it. And so we worked with a lot of different organizations and charities, and we worked with PBS, and it was on television and won the Emmy, and it was a very exciting time, but my heart was still in Ethiopia and still wanting to be back on the ground working with these women. And so through the film, actually, I was able to go back to Ethiopia, which is kind of rare when you work on a film, you just sort of go on to the next project. But I was able to go back with my church in New York, and then also we did a screening for Dr. Hamlin, who's the founder of the Fistula Hospital. It was her 50th anniversary in Ethiopia, and so we were able to do a screening there for the Minister of Health. And that was when I started thinking about being able to start a project. One of the things that I really saw was missing. That was a huge gap in the work that was being done with women with fistula, is beyond the physical treatment. So, as I mentioned, these consequences that are the social consequences and the rejection and the pain, I felt needed to be addressed, and that there was no reintegration support services. So some of the women that we were working with and we were filming with, they would have had no opportunity to actually go to a home or go to another place for rehabilitation. So we had to intervene for them. Some of the women, they were so young, 17 years old. They had no education because they were very early, and so they really would have been begging on the streets of Addis if they weren't even being physically cured, which in some cases they're not. About 75% of women are able to be totally cured, but there's still 25% of women that deal with incontinence. So that was the start of thinking about what we could do to help women with fistula, and then also to work to help prevent fistula, because we knew that this was something that could be prevented. So the idea came in about 5 years ago, 2009, and I was reading an article in National Geographic about a program called Necessary Angels. And it was about a program in India that worked with women with leprosy. They were rejected from their societies, and they were living in poverty. And these women were trained in education services and maternal health services, and they were actually able to bring some resources to their community, which elevated their social status. So that was sort of when the light bulb went off, and I said, that's, you know, what we can do with women with fistula. They've, you know, had nothing, and yet I believed that, you know, with education and empowerment, that they could be contributing members of their community, that, you know, with a bit of education and resources, that they could go back into their community, not only heal physically, but be empowered to help prevent the problem. And so that was how we created the Safe Motherhood Ambassador model. And I'm going to just share a little bit about our model, and just so you understand the work that we're doing in Ethiopia, and also the work that we're now partnering with Women of Vision and World Vision. So, thanks. So just a quick snapshot of maternal health in Ethiopia. So there's an estimated 140,000 cases of fistula currently in Ethiopia, and where we're working up in the north, which is the red, which has the highest incidence of fistula in the entire country. It's a very mountainous area, and very, very little infrastructure. What is the root cause of fistula? How can we really work to eliminate it? You know, how has it been eradicated here? Well, we know here that we have access to emergency obstetric care, like C-sections. And in Ethiopia, that's very far into the future. But looking at sort of the three core delays in maternal health, the first delay is that women don't know. They have a lack of awareness about the importance of actually going to a health center. So most women in Ethiopia give birth at home, over 80 to 85% of women, just traditionally over the years. And it's very difficult to get to a health center, and if they get there, the care might not be sufficient. So there's been a tradition of giving birth at home. And so part is a cultural understanding or education that fistula is something that giving birth is something that is a medical issue, that needs medical attention in some cases, that needs prenatal care checkups. And so that's the first step, is just being able to provide education to women in rural communities. And secondly, the access issue, and that women do live a day or several hours away from a health center. So you can imagine there's very little roads, there's little transportation, so many women are walking 9 months pregnant, and leading up to that, to be able to go to a health center, so several hours to be able to get checkups, and then for delivery. And then when they're there, they have no way to get home. There's no transportation. So there's difficulties in just transportation and infrastructure that need to be addressed. And then finally, if they get to a health center, is the midwife there even going to be trained? Does she know what she's doing? Is she going to provide quality care? And so a lot of women could end up being turned off by that and not interested. And certainly the lack of emergency obstetric care is very difficult. But at the health centers now in Ethiopia, there are more access to health workers, to phones, and to the ability to call an ambulance in a nearby hospital. So what we're trying to do is essentially shorten the emergency referral network so that women that are pregnant are not stuck in labor 3 days at home before they seek care, that they're actually at a health center where they might be able to get emergency obstetric care faster. As I mentioned before, beyond the physical repair for fistula patients themselves, social reintegration services are hugely essential. And these women, I mean, if you can imagine dealing with that rejection, psychologically, the trauma, and then not having any educational resources and feeling helpless, and sometimes in some cases the depression that's led to suicide or suicidal thoughts. So for these women, there is a deep sense of being just having more counseling and having more support and just being loved by the community and just knowing that they are have a purpose within their community. And so our vision has been to empower women to be able to successfully reintegrate and then serve as educators in safe delivery in their communities. And that's where we're training women as safe motherhood ambassadors. And we also are working within the government infrastructure. So we're part of the fistula task force to see new cases of fistula radically reduced within the next 5 years. And our vision in Tigray, where we're working, is to see fistula eradicated in that area. So we're working alongside World Vision and other partners to make sure that this area we're working in will be fistula free. But we cannot do it without our safe motherhood ambassadors, because they are truly on the front lines, working, doing door-to-door education to pregnant women. And this woman, Yeshalom, she suffered from a double fistula. And this was after being married at age 14 and having 4 days of prolonged labor, but suffering for 9 years. So 9 years not being able to control your urine or feces. It was just unimaginable. And so this is a graduation day after she's come to our program, and to see a smile on her face, and it's remarkable. I mean, to see how these women can be transformed through a very short period of time. I mean, it's 1 month that women come to our center for this counseling and the work that we're doing, but it's enough time when they've had no education in their entire life to have that opportunity and to have that fellowship with other women that have had fistula. Caleb? Our inspiration, I wanted to share this inspirational statement with you. And the painting, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's actually a painting that hangs up at the Addis Ababa Fistula Hospital. And some of you probably know the story in the Gospel from Luke 8. And the painting depicts a woman at the bottom there who had an issue of blood for 12 years. And similar to women with fistula, where she was living in isolation and outcast and rejected by her community. And so when Jesus comes to her community and is surrounded by people, she makes her way to touch the hem of his robe, no matter what it takes. And in doing so, she's instantly healed. But what I love about this scripture and the story is that not only Jesus knows that she's been healed physically, but then he turns back and says, "Who touched me?" And has this relationship with her that is profound. And I think that really, in a nutshell, speaks about our inspiration, that we really want to be the hands and feet of Jesus in this area. We want these women to know that they are truly loved by God. And so we do work, with in our community where we work in Tigray, which is where that big star is. It is about 98% Orthodox Christian in Ethiopia, and in the Tigray region. But we are open to working with women of other faith. Within the entire country, there are also, it's about 40% Muslim, and then some Protestant, Catholic, so all different denominations. And so our core program objectives, as I mentioned, prevention, the reintegration, and then also patient identification. And this is the Tigray region. So currently we're working in about 14 districts. They're called borders in Ethiopia. And with World Vision, we're working in 7 of those districts. World Vision calls them areas of program development. So we partnered with World Vision to work in 7 areas, and we're going very deep into those areas. And then we've recently launched an integrated maternal child health fistula prevention program, so that we can train over 150 safe motherhood ambassadors over 3 years. So these are our objectives, working alongside youth, working alongside Women of Vision and World Vision. We are looking to train, as I mentioned, 150 safe motherhood ambassadors over 3 years. And each of these women receive a loan. So as part of the curriculum, there's an economic empowerment component where we provide income-generating skills training and help women that have usually either depended on their husband or have not ever had access to a loan or education about savings or credit. We provide that training, and then we provide them with a microloan through a local women's microfinance agency called ABQ. And the loan is about $200, which is usually an average yearly income. It helps them to purchase sheep, goats, a cow, or start like a small business, a small market. And so we're distributing those loans, and we're also doing community engagement work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but some of the religious leader training, and then also some work within the stakeholders that we work with, health workers and other influential members of the community to help support the Safe Motherhood Ambassadors when they would reintegrate back home. In terms of prevention, so the Safe Motherhood Ambassadors are really addressing that first delay. So they're really helping to go door to door to talk to pregnant women about why it's so important to deliver at a health center. And they share their own testimonies. They share their own stories about having fistula and how it was caused. And that helps to educate other women about the danger of having a home delivery. And so we even have a didactic book that helps them share the story. It's a picture book of a story that has fistula, that ends up developing fistula, and then a woman that delivers safely. And so they're able to go door to door to the women's homes and share these stories, and then share their own story to help encourage women to go to a health center. And we also have started a new program with, we work in a town called McKellar. It's the capital of the Tigray region, and McKellar has a university and a midwifery school, and so we're now starting a training program working with midwives, and there are some Hamlin midwives also that have been working in the Tigray region, but we just started Skilled Hands of Joy to train, to upgrade the skills of community-based midwives. So these are midwives that have a diploma, but they don't have a degree, and eventually they've started a new master's program that could train midwives to actually be able to perform C-sections. So that's the future goals that we're hoping to be part of. And we also have just gotten a donation from a Chinese Huawei, a telecommunications company, to provide all of our Safe Motherhood Ambassadors with phones, which is going to be really helpful in being able to connect these women and the pregnant women that they're working with health workers and ambulances. And in a lot of countries in Africa, everyone has a phone, and the network coverage is quite good, but there's just very little roads. So you need to be able to call that ambulance or call for help. And the Safe Motherhood Ambassador curriculum, I won't go too much in depth, but essentially it's a 1-month program, and we train women in maternal health education, birth preparedness, HIV, fistula, traditional harmful practices, and really the importance of prenatal care visits, so that they can really encourage pregnant women about why it's important to be able to go to a health center. And then the empowerment program is, as I mentioned, the economic empowerment, and then we also provide psychological counseling, and we provide spiritual counseling. So, as I mentioned, the majority of these women are Orthodox Christian, and they've been deemed cursed by their communities, and so there's a huge amount of spiritual counseling needed to share with these women that they are beautiful, that God loves them unconditionally, and that they have a purpose. And there's so many things that are shared in terms of forgiveness and reconciliation to help them kind of move past the stigma and just to feel like they have a purpose past having fistula. And we also do literacy training, so a lot of women that are illiterate and have never been able to write their names, and by the end of the month they're able to sign for their own loan. And it's incredibly empowering for them to be able to just do something like, think of it as simple, but to never have been able to write your own name and then to be able to sign for this loan, it's very empowering for them. And the community work that we're doing, as I mentioned, the religious leader training program, we also do these community events where we work on a film called Fistula is Not a Curse. And so it's a film, like kind of a short soap opera that tells the story about what fistula is and how it can be prevented. And so we showed this in very rural communities where there's no electricity and you have a generator and have a huge screening in the middle of the night where the entire community comes out. The state Motherhood ambassadors speak, the religious leaders and the village leaders speak. And so it's a great opportunity to be able to raise awareness within the community. So far, we've been, as I mentioned, we opened up our first center in 2010, and that was the center that you saw in the film. And so we've been monitoring the work of our Safe Motherhood ambassadors and really being able to analyze the impact that they're making within their communities. And our Safe Motherhood ambassadors, we've had 260 now graduate through our program, and they have educated at this point, even more than that, so nearly 4,000 pregnant women in their communities. And they have, which has resulted in over 2,000, or close to 2,000 institutional deliveries. So these are women that would have been giving birth at home and now giving birth at a health center, fistula-free. And through our community engagement work, we've been able to educate over 4,000 people and identified over 30 cases of fistula, like women like you want. Within 8 months, we did an evaluation this year where 23, every Safe Motherhood ambassador has been able to educate 23 pregnant women in our community, with 22 of those going for antenatal care visits, and then 10 of those delivering safely. So each Safe Motherhood ambassador is having a strong impact on our community, not only with maternal health care, but because of the economic empowerment, really impacting her family and her community. I just wanted to share with you and sort of close in talking about one of the verses that has really also inspired us in our work. And it's from Isaiah 61:3, to appoint unto them that mourn, to give to them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. And that is really our goal. We want these women to have joy. We want them to not be living with heaviness or sadness or mourning. We want them to be lights in their community and ambassadors in health, but ambassadors also in just sharing the goodness, of God. And Teje, who is such a bright light, she was in our class in February, Safe Motherhood Ambassador class, and she was actually a Woman of Vision group from Charlotte came and spent some time with her, and she was married at 10, and gave birth at 13, and she developed fistula after 6 days of prolonged labor, and she had fistula for quite a while. She had to go in for surgery several times, and her stepfather, when she did return home, abused her. And she came to us, and it was remarkable. I mean, after dealing with such a difficult childhood, and then such a difficult life, now she's almost 20, and living with abuse, and really still struggling, even with the fistula being cured, but dealing with a family of abuse, she still came to us, and the love, every morning, just the hugs and kisses, and just she was just so happy to be in an environment of women, and to have that support, and to have, our trainers, and to have other women that had suffered from fistula from across the region, and to have the Women of Vision, to come and pray with her and to spend time with her. And she graduated just beaming. She's just such a beautiful, bright light. And so we're really grateful that we're able to, help minister to women like Teje, and that you're able to help us with that. And I also wanted to share in closing, I think what I had realized in my journey of healing, and really, after so many years, kind of feeling the same guilt and shame and rejection over something that was so difficult in my own life, and where I felt so disconnected from God, and really in some ways hiding from Him, and never really truly grasped how much He loves us and how much He loved me. And I have been just blessed to be able to be working with these women and how they have ministered into my life too. How that they helped me heal. And I think that that's what I've learned so much over the last 5 years, is that there is a mutual healing in so many of our lives, that, you know, we're often looking at helping to heal others in other countries, but there's also a lot of healing that needs to happen right here in our own communities and among our own friends and family. And so these women and this work has really inspired me and has completely, you know, changed my life and helped me to accept how much God loves me, and then it's just a privilege to be able to share that with you as well, and how much He loves each and every one of us, and how much He has a purpose and a plan for each and every one of our lives, and all of the women's lives in Ethiopia too. And so I'm just very grateful to be here, and just very grateful for your help and your support in helping to minister to these women in Ethiopia, and help our goal to be able to eradicate this from happening, so that no more women will have to suffer from something that can be so easily prevented. So thank you so much. Thank you for letting me share with you today.